You know, some diplomatic crises start with a bang, a missile test, a border dispute, big scary stuff, but the great North American debacle of 2025, it started with something much, much sweeter and stickier, and frankly, a little bit ridiculous. Picture this. The year is 2025. Things between the US and Canada were already chilly. Not quite Cold War chilly, more like someone left the fridge door open chilly. A subtle, lingering draft of awkwardness, you feel me? This wasn't about spies or secrets, it was about syrup. It was a time when everyone thought things couldn't get weirder. We'd seen it all, right? Or so we believed. Then came the incident. The one that made headlines. Not for its gravity, but for its sheer, unadulterated absurdity. It proved that sometimes the biggest international dramas don't need tanks or treaties. Sometimes all it takes is one person. One person with a microphone and perhaps a profound misunderstanding of breakfast condiments. And oh boy, did we have that person. Enter Ambassador Bartholomew Barty McBlunder. Yes, McBlunder. You can't make this stuff up. Or maybe someone did. He was the newly appointed US Ambassador to Canada. A man whose diplomatic experience was, shall we say, emerging. Like a butterfly that wasn't quite sure it wanted to leave the cocoon. He had a reputation for speaking his mind. Which is great for a motivational speaker maybe. Less great for an ambassador in a delicate situation, especially when his mind seemed to be on a permanent vacation. His first major public address in Ottawa. Big moment. Everyone's listening. What profound words will he offer? He steps up to the podium, clears his throat, and says it. He declared, with all the confidence of a man who's never been wrong, that American maple syrup was objectively superior to Canadian maple syrup. And that Canadian winters were frankly, a bit much. He even suggested Canadians secretly preferred Vermont's finest. The room went silent. You could hear a moose gasp. This wasn't just a comment, it was a declaration of syrup war. The immediate impact? Chaos. Pure, unadulterated Canadian outrage. Now the US and Canada, we go way back. Longest undefended border in the world, they say. Which is mostly true unless you count the occasional rogue squirrel. We're like siblings, we share a continent, a love for ice hockey, sometimes, and a history that's, well, complicated, mostly good. Lots of trade, lots of tourists crossing over. We've fought alongside each other in wars, we've built things together. NORAD, for example, protecting North America from, well, whoever. It's a partnership, usually. But like any family, there have been squabbles. Oh yes, way back in 1812 we had a bit of a disagreement. They burned down the White House. We remember it differently. More recently, trade disputes have been our go-to argument. Softwood lumber, dairy, steel, aluminum. It's like we can't decide who's better at making things from trees or cows. These tensions simmer, they bubble up. Then usually, we apologize, make a deal, and go back to being friendly. Until the next time someone mentions cheese tariffs. Poutine protests and political panic when sorry isn't enough. The Canadian public did not take this syrup slander lying down. Oh no, protests erupted. But these were Canadian protests, so they were surprisingly orderly, and very polite initially. Signs read, "Our syrup is superior, sorry." And, "McBlunder, are you even trying, eh?" But then it escalated. Someone threw a Nanaimo bar at the embassy. Then came the poutine. Not thrown, thankfully. But there were symbolic poutine boycotts of American fast food chains. It was a delicious form of dissent, a tasty rebellion. Across the border, American reactions were mixed. Some people were just confused. We're fighting about syrup now? Others found it hilarious. Late-night comedians had a field day. A few staunch nationalists, of course, defended Ambassador McBlunder. "He's just speaking the truth about our superior breakfast liquids," they cried. But mostly Americans were like, "Guys, can we not? They're Canada." There was a general sense that maybe, just maybe, our ambassador had stepped in something sticky. And it wasn't just maple syrup. The Canadian government, led by a very exasperated Prime Minister, issued a stern condemnation. This was not taken lightly. They called McBlunder's comments unhelpful and factually incorrect regarding breakfast condiments, which is about as fiery as Canadian political speech gets. The world is watching and giggling ripple effects of a gaffe. This wasn't just a North American spat anymore. Oh no, the world was watching. And mostly, the world was giggling. News outlets from London to Tokyo reported on the Great Syrup Standoff. Foreign diplomats were probably taking notes. Lesson 1. Do not criticize the host country's national sweetener. It became a bit of a global spectacle, a moment of light relief in an often tense international landscape. But for the US and Canada, it was less funny and more, oh dear, it highlighted how quickly even strong relationships can be strained. Economically, the impact wasn't devastating, not at first, but there were ripples. Canadian tourism boards reported a slight dip. Some American tourists felt awkward about ordering pancakes north of the border. There were calls in Canada to boycott American maple-flavored products, which, let's be honest, probably wasn't a huge market anyway. But it was the principle of the thing. Small trade talks on other, more serious issues stalled. Because who wants to talk about lumber when there's a syrup feud raging? It was a distraction nobody needed. Culturally, it was a goldmine. Operation Maple Leaf Mending. Can this syrup spill be cleaned? So, how do you fix a diplomatic crisis caused by syrup snobbery? Step 1, and this is crucial. Recall Ambassador McBlunder. Send him somewhere far away, maybe Antarctica. The Penguins probably don't care about syrup, or better yet, a mandatory class on global breakfast etiquette. He clearly needed it. This was non-negotiable. The man was a walking, talking international incident. His continued presence was like pouring salt or worse, corn syrup on the wound. He had to go, for the good of pancakes everywhere. Next, a grand gesture was needed. Something big, something Canadian. The US president could learn to play hockey, badly but with enthusiasm, or maybe send a delegation to Quebec's finest sugar shacks, bearing gifts of apology waffles, high-quality, American-made apology waffles, perhaps a joint US-Canada commission on North American niceness. Their first task to officially declare all North American syrups delicious in their own way. It sounds silly, but diplomacy is often built on silly-sounding compromises. And a little bit of humility wouldn't hurt. A big slice of humble pie perhaps, with Canadian maple syrup, but gestures alone wouldn't cut it. This needed real talk, behind-the-scenes diplomacy, actual conversations. Beyond the blunder, finding our way back to A-OK. Ultimately, the Great North American Debacle of 2025, as ridiculous as it sounds, served as a valuable lesson. It reminded us that even the closest relationships need constant care, like a cherished houseplant, or a particularly needy Tamagotchi. You can't take them for granted. You can't just assume they'll always be there, especially if you keep insulting their national symbols. Diplomacy isn't just for enemies, it's crucial for friends too, perhaps even more so. Because with friends, the stakes are higher. The good news is, the US and Canada have a lot holding them together. More than just a border, and a shared love for complaining about winter. We have shared values, shared cultures mostly, shared families, millions of connections that run deeper than any ambassador's gaffe. This syrup-fueled storm, in the grand scheme of things, was a blip. A very sticky, very memorable blip, but a blip nonetheless. The foundation of the relationship was strong enough to withstand it. Once the apologies were made, and the right syrup was acknowledged as superior, Canada's obviously. Repairing the damage took time. It took effort. It took a new ambassador who, hopefully, preferred coffee, and maybe a few carefully orchestrated photo ops involving pancakes.